Welcome back. We're now on to Chapter 2, Contextual Influences on Compensation Practices. As mentioned in Chapter 1, our compensation system, both federally, statewide, and locally, are based on a lot of laws that we already have set in place. And these laws have come about historically through the process of individuals finding that they haven't been paid equally, there's been discrimination on some sort of basis, and we're trying to level the playing field. Chapter 2 focuses on a handful of a lot of these legalities that were put into place over time in order to create equality with regards to compensation in the workforce. The relevant employment laws that we highlight in this chapter: the Equal Pay Act, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Bennett Amendment to the Title VII Act of 1964, Executive Orders 11246 and 11141, Age Discrimination in Employment, Older Workers Benefit Protection Act, and the Civil Rights Act of 1991. A lot of these are self-explanatory, and you most likely have heard of them referenced in some way, shape, or form in your current work environment. But this chapter gives us a little bit more history on it, so we can delve further into the rhyme and reason why they're in place now. So what is the makeup of the government? Who really decides all of these rules and regulations? They come apart through history. We have congressional, Senate, legislative members that put together these federal laws, these state laws that we must abide by. So it does vary a little bit on the organization, the number of employees that you have, the type of industry that you're in are all different factors for whether or not your organization must abide by these rules. There are a lot of different types of roles as well within an organization. So you can have one company, McDonald's, for instance, that has operations in every state, and they abide by different state rules, but they all adhere to the same federal rules. The concept of exempt and non-exempt employees is something you might be familiar with. Exempt employees are those that have different base salary wages, base rates, that are usually a little bit higher because they don't receive overtime rates. These tend to be your managers and your supervisors. Those that are non-exempt account for their hours on a minute-by-minute basis and can accrue overtime, double time, holiday pay, etc. There are different types of compensable work activities, different elements of your job that an employee can be paid for other than working. For example, waiting time, being on call, that's a great example of someone receiving wages. So if you have someone in a 24-hour industry, such as healthcare, it would be cheaper for the organization to pay someone in a exempt status than it would be to pay them to be on call for 24 hours a day, knowing that they would most likely receive phone calls during the evening or during the off hours. Rest and meal periods are compensable times. Travel time depends on the organization. A lot of places can actually pay you to commute back and forth between work. These are some great benefits that employees might not be aware of. Child labor law, the Child Labor Act, says that age 14 and younger cannot work in an organization. 15 up to 18 can work if they have a work permit. Depends again on the state. The Equal Pay Act of 1963 came about in 1963 with the concept that not everyone in the workforce was receiving equal pay or the same amount of wages for the duties that they are doing. This does change a little bit, or there are different elements, I will say. You can have a police officer. One is male, one is female. They can receive different wages if they have different elements of their position. Maybe one is a supervisor, one is not. One has 10 years of experience, one has 5 years of experience. But if you have two people that are doing the same job, regardless of race, age, they need to be making the same amount of money. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, on a very broad level, it deals with a lot of discriminatory elements in the workforce. For this chapter, we're discussing disparate impact and disparate treatment. Disparate treatment is where you have individuals or employees, we'll say, that are treated unfairly because of their race, color, gender, religion, or national origin. That's what's pulled from Title VII. Disparate impact is when we are unfairly treating a group of individuals, such as a group of males or a group of females. Equal pay for women came about with the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act says, just like we stated before, if we have individuals doing the same job, women should be receiving the same amount of pay as their male counterparts. This goes into the Paycheck Fairness Act, still going along with Women's Fair Act. There is a lot in this chapter. I mentioned in your last lecture I try to keep these about 5 minutes long. So there's a few more here in the chapter dealing with age discrimination. We want to make sure that our employees have the same accessibility to benefits, compensation, to their wages, regardless of their age. Americans with Disability Act. We want to make sure that we are not limiting our employees, that we give them the same opportunities, the same amount of pay, as long as we are able to reasonably accommodate them in the workplace. Family Medical Leave Act of 1993, otherwise known as FMLA, that gives people, both men and women, a lot of people only think of it as being pregnancy, but you have men and women in the workforce that are able to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid time on the books and are able to return back to their position, or at least return back to a position that is comparable to what they were in before. And not all 12 weeks need to be taken at once. They can be broken up over the year for the birth of a child, adoption, taking care of a loved one, loss of a loved one, but there are some regulations on that. This chapter goes on and on and on. There's a lot to it. COBRA, this is a benefits package that's available to employees if they are separated from an organization, either terminated or they leave willfully. It can be a cheaper option for obtaining health and medical benefits than to go out on your own. HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. This is put into place to make sure that we are protecting employees' information, that we are protecting patient information, privileged information, really. So that is a quick gloss on our chapter in 7 minutes. Make sure you do your burning question. We're well into chapter 2, so we're going strong.